Hey everybody, James with Love My Pups, My Breeder Supply. Question and answers. Today is the back end of October. So here we go. So somebody did an AI and now their dog is incontinent. So what they're saying is that after the AI, a couple of days later, the dog is having accidents in the house, peeing a lot. What's going on? And so the answer is probably that dog has a urinary tract infection. That's probably what's going on. So they probably need to go to their, well, I would do this. First thing is check the temperature, make sure the temperature is below 101.5. If it's above that, go to the vet. Second one is that you could try doing a douche with some vinegar and water. That might fix the problem too. But if it persists for more than a couple of days or you have an elevated temperature, time to go to the vet. Somebody's asking about what are Tweeds and Harlequins. We're talking about merles and particular patterns of merles. So the normal merle pattern is a background color that might be a brown, a tan, a grey color, with then patches of color on top of that, and it can vary all over the place. It might just be a few patches, it may only be a few on the muzzle, you may not have much merle showing at all, but either way, any kind of patches that are kind of irregular, that is a merle. Not to be confused with pied, which is a different look. Pied is always on a white background, so it's a color on a white background, like, you know, a red on a white background, blue on a white background, chocolate on a white background. Now you can have a merle pied, but the merle is definitely a different look than a solid color that you see in a pied or a brindle. So the first thing is you have to be able to identify what merle is. Then there are these different shades of merle. And so the interesting ones, in my opinion, the interesting ones are the Harlequins and the Tweeds. So a Harlequin is a white background, as opposed to being a grey or a fawn or a blue background. They are a white background. So Harlequins, you will see a merle dog with a white background, that's a Harlequin. Tweeds are three different colours, two colours on a background. So you might see two different shades of grey on on another different grey background, or you might see two different shades of chocolate on a chocolatey background. So you'll actually see three colours in a tweed. How do you clean the C-section incision? Say that quickly 3 times. C-section incision. So, well, look, your dog had major surgery, had its stomach cut open, and had puppies removed through C-section. There's now a wound that's been closed up that's, you know, something in the order of, you know, depending on the size of the dog, 2 to 6 inches long. And it's a prime place to get an infection. If you went to the hospital and you woke up and you didn't have a bandage on your incision, you'd probably be pretty upset. We're not putting bandages on our dogs because they just knock them off. Worse yet, dogs don't have the same instinctive hygiene that we do. They can't get down to lick their wound, which probably wouldn't be a good thing anyway, and they tend to pee and poop in the whelping box, and they can get that on the incision. So you do want to clean that incision at least once a day. And so what do? Well, you can do something as simple as just some warm soapy water and just gently rub that area, because the stitches that are there tend to collect up muck and hairs and poop, so you definitely want to give that a good cleaning. You could use antiseptic wipes, that's absolutely fine too. But the primary thing you want to do is make sure the wound is clean and it looks good. You don't want an angry looking red scar. Specifically, it's really red in some areas and not in others. That would be an indication you have an infection. You don't want a wound that is opening up in places where you can actually see a hole there. That is time to go back to the vet and get the incisions closed up. May have popped a stitch. You don't want to see a wound that is got some yellowy pussy stuff coming out of it, because that definitely requires the vet's intervention and quite possibly some antibiotics. So the way the wound looks is important. If your dog has a temperature, it's important to go to the vet. If you have a wound that looks sketchy, looks different in different areas, looks red and angry and swollen, in different areas, it's opened up a little bit or it's pussy, definitely time to go to the vet before you get in big trouble. Is stenosis hereditary? So we're talking about nares that are closed up, you know, a dog that has closed nares. We're talking about that basically, and we're talking about the powers of the dog. Well, look, I mean, think of it this way. You know, if you've got people who are French tend to have what we call the Roman nose. They have a more of a pronounced nose than people from other parts of the world, called the Roman nose. Is that hereditary? Absolutely. I mean, you can see it. You know, you'll have a mum and dad who have a Roman nose, and then you'll see the same thing in their offspring. So, and I mean, it's true of all ethnicities. You know, the structure of our faces tends to, you know, if you're Chinese, you have almond-shaped eyes, and you pass it on to your children. Is it hereditary? Yeah, absolutely. So is stenosis hereditary? Yes, very likely that a large part of it is hereditary. So I think then the question becomes, at what point does stenosis become a problem? And I mean, look, if you've got a dog that's got really small collapsed nares, then I mean, I think you need to pay attention to that and breed to a dog, if you're going to breed that dog, breed to a dog that has more open nares, and hopefully you'll fix the problem in the majority of the dogs. But if you've got a dog that's got really pinched up nasal passages, and you breed that to another dog with pinched up nasal passages, you're likely to have puppies with pinched up nasal passages, and those dogs may require surgery to be able to breathe successfully and not get overheated in the summertime. So yeah, they're definitely hereditary components of it. Somebody's asking about day one. Is that the day that they AI'd, or is that the day of first blood? That's a good question, because you can refer to either one of them as day one. So let's just talk about what we mean by day one. So when I say day one, I typically are talking the first day that I see blood on clothing, on the floor, on bedding for a dog that's starting its heat, starting its period. So prior to day one, the dog could be swollen, you could see a change in behavior, but I count day one as the day that I can actually see blood. That's day one. And then most dogs are bred between day 11 and 13 after that. So then the next thing that you talk about is, when am I going to have a C-section, or when is my dog going to have puppies? And so in that respect, we talk about day one as the day that the dog was AI'd, and we expect to see puppies about 61 days after that date, or 63 days from ovulation. So it can get confusing when we start talking about day one, but again, day one for a dog that's about to be bred is first blood. Breed that dog typically 11 to 13 days later. Day one for a dog that's having a C-section would be the day that you AI'd, and you then expect to have puppies presented 61 days after day one, first day of blood. Get on time here. We'll do a couple more. How many times can I breed my dog? Right, I've got a whole video on this, and it said unethical breeding, the ins and outs of breeding your dog back to back. And so the answer to this is that I would go review that video, because there's quite a long description there of when it's okay to and when it's not okay to. So there's not a simple answer to this, but the short answer is, if your last litter was successful, your mum bounced back to normal health, the puppy litter was successful, the puppies were great, and then it's probably okay to go again immediately. Otherwise, it's probably time to take a rest. So let's just do three more here. Someone's talking about breeding a cocoa dog, so little CO, little dog, little CO, which would be what we used to call untestable chocolate, to a little d blue dog. What will you get? Not going to get any cocos, you're not going to get any blues. All the dogs will carry a copy of cocoa, all the dogs will carry a copy of blue. Those dogs are either going to be tan dogs or brindle dogs, depending on whether there's brindle present. Somebody's asking about Giardia. Have you experienced it? Absolutely. So Giardia is one of those things that if you breed dogs very much, you are going to come across Giardia. And you know, the symptoms of Giardia is a gut parasite. It causes a dog to have diarrhea. Dogs that are left untreated with Giardia can get into trouble because they can get malnourished because they're not absorbing food into their gut. They can get a severe intestinal bleed. they can get diarrhea that can cause them to be dehydrated. So any time that you have puppies, and typically you don't see Giardia popping up until puppies are at least a couple of weeks old. And typically Giardia, it's a really mucousy stool that might be tinged with blood. That's the common symptoms of Giardia, and it tends to have a distinct metallic smell. So what do? Well, the first thing is I sell a Giardia test. It's a snap test. Basically, you take a little bit of poop, you put it into a little window of a cassette, you wait 5 minutes, 2 lines pop up if you've got Giardia, and 1 line pops up if you don't. It's kind of like a pregnancy test. And I don't remember the price on those tests, but they sell 5 quantities and 10 quantities, and they're like $10 a test, something like that. If you don't like that solution, you can go to your vet. They'll do a fecal exam and a flotation, and they'll look for the parasite under the microscope. And if you have a microscope, you can actually do that yourself too. But the treatment for it is you treat with metronidazole, which is an antibiotic. You do it for 5 straight days at least. If you're having loose stools, you're not getting it sorted out, then it's time to either diagnose it with a snap test, diagnose it by going to a vet, because you want to get it taken care of. If you don't, then the dog's absolutely going to have a rough time with it. I mean, you could potentially lose a dog over Giardia. I never have personally, but it can happen. It has happened to other people. How do you know if your puppy has been line bred or inbred? So, the answer to this is the only way that you know is you have to look at the pedigree of the 2 parents. Well, you have to look at the pedigree of the puppy. So, if you're worried that somebody's line breeding or inbreeding, which people do, we don't do it. People in the show ring do it for various reasons. There are some real risks with doing it. I don't recommend it unless you've got some darn good reason to get it done. But the answer is the only way that you can categorically know is you have to go get the pedigree of that puppy, and then you look to see whether there's common ancestry. So inbreeding would be like, for instance, you bred a mother to a son or a daughter to a dad. Line breeding would mean that you've got, if you look back in the pedigree, you've got common parents. You might have the same grandparent on both the mother's side and the father's side. So that would be line breeding, which is less dangerous than inbreeding. If you've got a common ancestry in the great-grandparents, it's probably not that big a deal because you've got plenty of genetic diversity. But the answer is you've got to rely on your person you buy the dog from, and they've got to provide you with a pedigree that you can look at. And by the way, if they won't do that, then I would say, number 1, you might question what you're doing. Number 2 is if you've already got the dog, you can you can spend $35, I think it is, and get a pedigree report from the AKC. If it's an AKC registered dog with an AKC registration number, you can go on the AKC site and you can get a pedigree report and you can look for yourself. So now, look, there are some ways that people could cheat. I mean, it could be that the dog they sent you and the pedigree they sent you are not the same dog. There are ways around that one too. You can do a DNA parentage, and you can find out whether the dog that you have really is the dog that you've got the pedigree on. So you can do a DNA parentage to the AKC. I think that's about $40. But again, you know, the majority of the time, hopefully you're trusting the people you're getting a puppy from, and there's no, you know, jimmery pokery going on. But there are ways to go check it if you have your doubts. Hey, we're at 40 minutes. That's plenty of time for this particular session. If you like what we're doing, then give us a thumbs up. We'd love it if you subscribe to us. Go check out our website. There's a lot of information there, and there's some great products that I think will absolutely help you with your breeding program. Thanks for watching. Bye, everybody.